miss you all. I thoroughly hope that you are enjoying our chapter retreat. As for me, I am pegged to talk about a serious, albeit necessary topic. We are cruising along as we discuss when to engage in critical conversations. Now, Soros, is it me, or have you also noticed that we seem angrier today than ever before? Well, I can tell you that statistics show that it's not just our feelings of anger increase. According to statistics, domestic violence has gone up. According to the Houston Police Department, homicides have increased by 35%. The divorce rate has ticked up. And I know you've all seen those videos where Karens are wilding out on airplanes, in stores, at parks. What about Twitter feuds between Drake and Kanye? What about the January 6th insurrection? People are literally waking up, choosing violence. And whether that is literal or figuratively speaking, that's where we are today. And I submit to you, Soros, that a lot of that is based on unresolved conflict. Unresolved conflict can negatively impact us in ways that we see and cannot see. It will impact our health both physically and mentally. If we set aside the coronavirus spread, Soros, statistics show that Americans are sicker today than years prior. Just like there is good trouble, as coined by the late United States Representative John Lewis from Georgia, and bad trouble, there's also good conflict and bad conflict. The good conflict being healthy conflict, the bad conflict being high conflict. So you may ask, what's the difference? What's the difference in the two? Well, the difference in the two is how you maneuver through the conflict. For example, if you get stuck and mired down in conflict, Soros, that is unhealthy, high conflict. If you're able to take conflict and see your way out of it through a resolution, by whatever way and means that's defined, well, that, Soros, is healthy conflict. And I submit to you that there are times when yelling and becoming emotional during a conflict is healthy. The goal is to get towards a positive resolution, again, by however means and way you define it. Now, you do know that there are some people who actually enjoy conflict and they don't want it to end. And for those people, this topic, this subject matter is not necessarily geared to help them. They want to be stuck. But for those of us who want to reach positive resolution, let's talk about it. Yes, there's turmoil all around us in our homes, in our workplaces, in our communities, and in our government. And that's why this topic is super, super important. And I actually want to pause and thank the leadership in our chapter for ensuring that we discuss it. How do we manage high conflict? Okay, well, Soros, there are two capacities for handling conflict. The first one is adversarial. It's one I know all too well in the legal profession. That's not really good, and we'll discuss that more. The second capacity to handle conflict is when you are geared towards solidarity and collaboration. Well, that's the healthy kind. So I challenge you to think about this. Why is there conflict? To answer that question, Soros, we may actually have to look in places we're not currently looking. All right, so travel with me as we talk about it. Parents say of disobedient children, oh, if only that child could behave better, right? They want the child to change. And partners say of their significant others, God, if only he do X, Y, Z, we can move past this. Employees with overbearing managers say the same thing. I just wish she was not so difficult. Goodness. And what about that soror feuding with another soror? Well, she says the same thing. It's the other soror. Notice a pattern? The pattern is that we each want the other person to make changes. And if they do, we feel as though things will magically improve. But today, I submit to you that perhaps the answer lies within us, that parent, that employee, that partner, and that soror. Today is all about what you can do to effectuate a positive change. But again, we have to realize that some of us really do want conflict for the sake of. And some of us have been operating under that adversarial prong that I talked about earlier, where we want a winner and we want a loser. But I will tell you that that is not always healthy. In fact, the Bible says, Mark 8, verse 36, for what shall it profit a soror? Yeah, it's a soror. What shall it profit a soror if she wins the argument and loses her soul, her friend? All right, so you absolutely read that soror for filth. Now what? Now what? Sorors, I will tell you that tip number one is that we must engage when we are committed to truly resolving the conflict. We're not keeping score. We don't want a clear victory. We're not aiming to be adversarial. And if you're not ready to end that conflict, you are wasting your time. All right, so that's tip one. Now, to get beyond conflict sorors, we actually have to go through it. We have to put in the work. We cannot do surface level work in resolving conflict. It cannot be obligatory, like, okay, well, I'll hear her out. So listen to this scenario. Soror number one comes to soror number two, and she says, I'm angry at you. You missed my milestone birthday gathering. And soror two says, I'm sorry, I was just so tired Friday night. Soror one comes back and says, you don't support me. My birthday gathering was an opportunity for you to support me. All right, so that's that. Notice that soror one never asked and soror two never volunteered why soror two missed the birthday gathering. She never offered why she was so tired. That's surface level resolutions. It turns out soror two was so exhausted because she now has a new boss, and her boss is hard to please. And she's had to put in lots of time, lots of hours at work that week, and was truly exhausted. Can you see how that might make a difference in resolving this conflict? But sorors, we can't stop there. Real work requires us to also consider it from the other soror's perspective, the birthday soror's perspective. Imagine had we asked soror number one, why was it so important that soror number two attend your birthday gathering? And imagine if the birthday soror said, I just recently moved to Texas, and soror two was the very first person who welcomed me and befriended me. And I invited all my family from up north down to Houston to celebrate my birthday. And I really wanted my family to meet her. Well, can you see how that changes the perspective and the dynamic? Can you see how asking the why is this important to each soror is critical? Because both of them make compelling arguments for their feelings. So sorors, I hope that you know that I'm sorry I missed your birthday party, I was tired, is just surface level. It may patch up this conflict between those two sorors, but it also may result in underlying resentment because we never got at the why. Why does it matter to you? And why did it matter to me? That kind of conversation is risky, it's uncomfortable, but sorors, it is necessary if the goal is to get towards a positive outcome, some sort of solidarity, collaboration, some healthy conflict resolution. At the end of the day, Soros, if you think about it, we all just want to be understood. And I will submit to you, even as an attorney, sometimes the being understood part is more valuable than actually winning. Because studies show that once a person feels understood, they really do tend to relax their defenses and they become less embittered. And actually, Soros, when a person feels understood, they're actually more capable, willing, and able to try and understand the other party. So tip number 2, to overcome conflict, we must go deep into that conflict. And we must ask the why questions. We must do the work to get to the understory. Now, Soros, you know why most of us don't feel heard? It's because most of us are not listening. I said it. Most of us are not listening. Yeah, we nod our head. We pretend to be present, but most of us really do jump to conclusions right out the gate. And we think we understand the other party, but we don't. And really, a lot of us, myself included, we only really listen so that we can prepare a response. A study showed that doctors interrupt their patients after 11 seconds of that patient's explanation of their ailment. 11 seconds. And that same study showed that patients really only need about 18 seconds to fully identify their ailment. So 7 seconds is lost. That's nominal. That's nominal time in the grand scheme of things. But can you imagine what is missed by interrupting the patient, by not allowing those 7 seconds to continue? Now, this is not a knock on any one profession. I am pretty sure lawyers are worse than this in terms of listening, but it is something for us to consider because there are real consequences to our not listening to one another, truly listening. What it means is that the other party is likely to shut down, to stop talking, to become defensive and not trust the process. But when we feel heard, there's magic in that, because at that point we become more flexible, more productive. If you're at work, you trust the process, and you're actually vested in the ownership of a positive outcome. So Soros, I would encourage all of us to try something called looping. Looping, L-O-O-P-I-N-G, looping. The looping technique is this. Allow the person to fully express themselves. And only after they're completed, only after they're done, do you say, I want to see if I heard you. You said, and then you try to regurgitate what was said, not word for word. I mean, trying to mimic a person word for word defeats the purpose. The purpose is really for us to try and put ourselves in the other person's shoes. We don't have to agree with them. We just have to listen to them and see if we can regurgitate the sentiments, their sentiments. And then we should always end by, is that right? Did I get that right? At this point, Soros, when we engage in the looping technique, we are listening for curiosity's sake, not to prove our point or have the last word. And we're also double checking to make sure, did I hear you right? Is that right? Because I want to understand it from your perspective. Now, I will tell you that you will not always capture that other person's sentiments. And actually, the person who spoke fully will appreciate your effort in trying. But this technique forces you to let the other person lead and you follow. And at that point, there's appreciation. As Soros will tell you that you can tell when a person is not truly listening to you. You can tell when they are going through the motions, when they're just dialing it in. And that's a terrible feeling. This technique of looping, it takes practice. And so I would encourage each of us from this day forward to try it. But remember, the goal is to understand it from the other person's perspective. Again, even if you disagree. And as I said from the outset, I miss you all terribly. I cannot wait for us to fellowship in person. But the other thing that I cannot wait for is for us to get back to the point and the place where we can agree to disagree. There is no harm in that at all. So tip number 2 is to overcome conflict sorrows. You must develop better listening skills. Engage when you are committed to doing the hard work of truly listening. Now, as I close, I will say that there is another side effect of unhealthy high conflict. Have you ever thought about what our conflict, how it impacts third parties, what we call bystanders? Have you ever thought about the effects of our conflict on other sorors who are actually friends with both of us? Or how our conflict at work actually affects the entire department? What about the conflict between spouses and how it affects other couples who have befriended us both? That alone should motivate us sorors to try to resolve conflict in a way that is collaborative and engages in solidarity. Whether you are managing conflict between your children or your coworkers, or sorors, whether you yourself are embroiled in some conflict with another soror or family member, you make the choice. I make the choice on how to handle that conflict. So as I exit this journey, I will tell you that to prepare, I read several articles. I hope this was helpful. And I read several books, including High Conflict, How We Get Trapped and How We Get Out by Amanda Ripley, and The Anatomy of Peace, PEACE, As We Resolve the Heart of Conflict by the Arbinger Institute. Thank you, and I hope you continue to enjoy our chapter retreat.